with the plantings that are currently proposed to see how that sightline begins to be obscured. So it provides us the opportunity for those trees to grow in over time. We have some existing screening that would be there and available at original construction. Those trees would be really just at the tops of those roofs at initial planting, and then have the opportunity to grow in over time. Now, we did have to be fairly selective about the types of trees that we plant. It is in somewhat close proximity to the structure. We need to make sure we have no combustible sources within 10 feet, but also we have to make sure of, okay, what happens when a tree gets taller? It gets a little wider too, so we have to make sure that the type of tree that we select there can be selectively trimmed from the backside, but still provide a fairly reasonable screening over time. I look at this and I think it's fairly consistent with what our original message was, that are there some components of this structure that can be seen? Yes, but is it obtrusive to the point that is detrimental to the public? Is it doing a disservice to the public to allow this structure to be built here? I'd be of the opinion that this would be an acceptable structure with showing these additional graphics as to how it ties into its environment, specifically in regards to the important sightline that was identified by this board. Now, and stop me as I go if you want me to expand in any area. I was hoping I'd touch on all these requests and then we'd read in the actual variance request. But one of the other clarifications or requests was really in regards to, all right, you said the structure needs to be this tall. Can you give us some more information? The reality is the height of the structure is a function of its width. The curvilinear nature of the sports dome is required in that you need to have equal pressure distributed throughout the structure. Make sure it keeps the stability of the structure, keeps it inflated. In order for this structure to obtain a building permit, it needs to meet certain requirements of the International Building Code. New Hampshire recently went to 2015 IBC, which specifically addresses air-supported structures. So there are lateral loads and horizontal loads that are applied to that structure. One of significance is a snow load. So you need to have a certain curvilinear nature of that structure so that your snow sheets off of it. If there's too much of a live load of the snow, you'd have the opportunity for the structure to be negatively impacted. So you can choose my words correctly here.
I was thinking the same thing. Pancake.
The reality being, it's created this way very much for a reason. It ties into the International Building Code. It is something your code review officer, as well as I'd say your building code officer, I should say, would be reviewing as part of any building permit submittal, as well as the state fire marshal would also probably be looking at this. So that curvilinear nature, which is predicated off the width and the height of the structure, they all really tie into each other. As a good rule of thumb, some of the information I was able to get from the manufacturer of the dome is really, it's a 30% ratio. So the width of the structure times 30% gives you a pretty good ballpark as to what the height of the structure would be. Now, we have a 230-foot wide structure, which would amount to approximately 69 feet. The variance requested is for 75, with the expectation that it would be a 72-foot structure as currently constituted. So really, why does it need to be as tall as it is? So it can obtain a building permit so that it can meet the necessary requirements of the state. The fourth item that we discussed, and it's kind of coming back to this, is our landscape plan. We wanted to know, all right, well, you said you're going to landscape the site so that it ties in with its surroundings. Well, how are you going to accomplish this? Now, the lot itself, we can see is really outlined here. With the proposed structure and the entrance approach, that was the area of focus that our landscape architect took, so that as you come down the site driveway, you're greeted with some landscaping. You're not just looking at the entity that is the sports dome structure, the indoor sports field. There's the ability to take your eye, because if you're in your vehicle, you're at a visual height of 3 feet 9 inches, that we've selected groups of plantings that provide basically a staged effect. So you have some lower masses that are your shrubs or variegated grasses, and then you start to get into taller shrubs and trees, which really help distract you from what otherwise would be directly in front of you, that being the air-supported structure. Now, I'm not going to try and kid this board and say, oh, you're not going to see it. You are. We've looked at the perspectives. We know that there are some sightline elements, but the question is, can we make this an attractive site? And I think what we have done thus far, which obviously would be subject to planning board review and approval, the plantings, my understanding, within the parking lot meet the requirements. You can see the area of landscaping that we discussed previously with the abutter, that being tax map 6 lot 1-1, where we had created the section element, the sight line through their backyard to make sure that the types of evergreen plantings that we provided here would obscure their sight line. And again, we've looked at this as a staged approach. Not only are we providing the trees along the street line to help obscure that view, we're providing the evergreen trees along the back of this abutter's property to infill so that they don't have a direct sight line. And then you also see a fair amount of street trees along the perimeter to also tie in that tiered effect. So again, as you're driving through this parking lot, you're looking at landscaping. Now, if you're standing in front of the structure, obviously there's a sight line to that, but otherwise, it's fairly typical to a commercial development project. Shade trees within the parking lot, and again, masses of varying shrubs and ground covers to infill the site. So I'm going to try and be short and sweet with this. Those were the components we were asked to address. I'm hopeful that we were successful in doing so, but if there's outstanding questions, I'd love to fill in any of those holes before reading the application into the record.
You guys have questions?
No, not at this point.
John? Sandra?
No.
Alan?
All set?
All set? Okay.
All right,
You're
we'll move
good to-
on to the formal application point. All right. And I'm battling a little something, so if I lose my voice at some point, I think Jeremy's in the audience and he'll read the rest for us. So the ordinance section for which a variance is requested, that being section 4.3, table of dimensional regulations, to allow maximum structure height of 75 feet tall for indoor sports field, where a maximum of 45 feet is allowable. The description of why a variance is required. The applicant is proposing an indoor sports field that will be used for both youth-based sports teams and adult teams for turf sports such as soccer, baseball, softball, lacrosse, football, etc. The facility will have a fully enclosed turf field, which will be available for use year-round. In conjunction with the technical review committee meeting undertaken for this project, it was determined the height of the structure exceeds the allowable height in the industrial district. As such, a variance is required. Now, as far as the criteria, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. And that was one of the things that we really touched on with those graphics and those important sightlines. Variances are contrary to the public interest when they unduly and in a marked degree conflict with the ordinance, such that it violates the ordinance basic zoning objectives. Noting mere conflict with the terms of the ordinance is insufficient. Undue and marked conflict exists if granting the variance would alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. The height of the indoor sports field structure will not create hazards to the health, safety, or general welfare of the public. The space above the field is not occupied, and as such creates no need for emergency responders to reach upper elevations of the structure for life safety. The height will not impact the character of the neighborhood, as the site is currently defined by 4 existing commercial towers, each of which measure 205 feet tall based on information compiled by New Hampshire Statewide Geographic Information Systems, GIS, Clearinghouse, New Hampshire Granite. These 4 towers would be removed to accommodate the proposed indoor sports field. Now, although not the primary premise for the application, I think it's more important when we talk about substantial justice and not impacting the public health and safety. The reality is we do have 4 really tall structures out there. They would be removed. I think our intent more so is with the perspectives is to better support that this isn't contrary to the spirit of the ordinance. It's assumed relative to the use is not contrary to the spirit of the ordinance. It is assumed the general intent of any height restriction is to secure public safety and provide for appropriate emergency response, provide adequate circulation of light and air, and to protect the character of districts in the interests of the general public in important views. We've seen where our structure is sited relative to setbacks. There is no issue with adequate circulation of light and air. We've provided our perspectives to support those concerns with important views. As previously stated, life safety issues are mitigated by the structure enclosing a turf sports field with no occupied space above the field, as well as the field enclosure consisting of non-combustible, non-flammable material. Relative to the view, the height of the structure for the indoor sports field is much different than the typical building envelope in that the height of the structure is a function of its width, and it is a curved roof whose profile imitates a structure of nearly half the actual height as it reduces in elevation from its apex to its connection point on ground level. The indoor area will be lit, but the materials of construction for the structure are not translucent, such that no nuisance, light, or glow would be created. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. The guiding factor for substantial justice is that any loss to the individual that is not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. Granting the request of the height of the structure to allow the proposed indoor sports field will provide additional recreational opportunity to the community while also developing an otherwise underutilized property. There is no apparent gain to the community by the denial of the request. The value of surrounding properties will not be diminished. The height will not impact the character of the neighborhood, as the site is currently defined by 4 existing commercial towers, each of which measure the 205 feet, as stated in previous portions of the application. And again, this is an industrial district. You could have an industrial building that's located on this premise within 45 feet. We don't feel that there's a discernible difference with the type of materials or otherwise that we're proposing here as it relates to diminishment of property values. Relative to the special conditions of the property, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. The general purpose of the height limitation is to secure safety, provide adequate circulation of light and air, and to protect the character of its districts and the interests of the general public in important views. And the height of the structure of the indoor sports field, again, is a function of its width. Its construction requires the height specified to accommodate the proposed turf field. In order to support its use, the relief of the height restriction above 45 feet is required. In that the additional height of the indoor sports field is not contrary to the purpose of the ordinance, we would deem no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of this ordinance and the specific application of that provision to the proposed development, and that relief may be granted without frustrating the purpose of the ordinance. In this specific case, full application of the 45-foot height limitation is not necessary to promote a valid public purpose, as the overriding criterion is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare, which the height of the proposed indoor sports field does not impair. The proposed use is a reasonable one, given the existing public view limitations imposed by the commercial towers and the public benefit of expanded recreational opportunities. The proposed use is a reasonable one. And again, in that this board granted a variance for the use of this facility at the site, I suppose would be a tag-along to that criteria as well, that again, it's a reasonable use of the site. That is the formal application component. There's questions, either Frank relative to the use of the facility or the information that presented this evening, we'd be happy to answer.
Anybody? John?
No, I think we've talked about this enough. I mean,
Denise?
I do have a question. So the height is due to the structure of the building? So it's not for the reason of the sports that are gonna take place inside?
You could really say it's a bit of column A, column B, because why would you use it? Why would you propose an air-supported structure? It's free and open inside. You have no vertical columns, no impediments to prevent playing of sports. If this was a traditional style building, in order to carry the load across such large open spaces like you would in a warehouse, you would see those vertical columns spaced at even intervals such that you could have such a large structure. So this type of structure lends itself to this particular use. If we were to use a different type of structure, we wouldn't be able to have our use. So they're very much married.
So you're saying there's no other structure that has a big span?
No, I would say that this
There are
specific
some.
structure, I would
Okay.
agree. Relative to this type of specific structure and how it's intended to be used, this is the right fit.
So the requirement, what would the height requirement be for any building? Not this particular structure. How high does a building need to be to play soccer?
Frank, do you have a?
Well, that depends. I mean, when you're talking about older youth or adult soccer, you're looking at, players that have the ability to kick a ball, 50 to 100 feet high. So the reason why we're proposing a structure like this is that we're not going to have any impediments to being able to use that height for free and open space. You can't really replicate that necessarily in a warehouse building per se. I mean, you end up with a building that is, far too large and far too expensive to make the proposal work.
And it would still be tall, because you
Correct.
need trusses.
Right.
You can almost look at it more as, on a larger size, Tropicana Field where Major League Baseball team plays, it has a dome-type structure, but they built catwalks in and around the upper portions of the stadium, which they constantly hit baseballs into. And they had to create specific rules just to use that structure for that purpose. This alleviates that concern.
Sandra?
I'm good. More of a comment than a
Yes, sir.
question. I've been favorably impressed by the fact I believe you've done your homework well and addressing the concerns of the abutters and coming back with the rendering here that we're talking about. I think is exactly the view that both Denise and I were looking for from the last
You guys even
meeting.
drew it on a plan for us. We couldn't screw that up.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
I think one of my initial concerns with this was the traffic, and by the fact that the applicant is saying it's going to be strictly a sports and athletic venue. I think one of the concerns was that it turns into something like the Hampshire Dome, which is as much an event venue as a sports venue, and I don't see that this has the parking to support that kind of usage. So, again, I've been favorably impressed by the response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan?
Just one question. Are all the towers going, or are some of them going?
There are 4 towers that are located on the existing site. All 4 of those towers would be removed. There is a 5th tower that is located on a portion of, I believe, the Monahan's property, off-site. That one would stay. So the 4 towers located on this property are removed.
But those towers are all interconnected. What happens with the structure when you take it apart?
I unfortunately do not have that information. My understanding is the applicant, or I should say the individual who is responsible for those towers, has filed the appropriate work with the paperwork with the FAA such that they may be removed. And that is the extent of my knowledge. Otherwise, we would have to ask that individual for further elaboration.
Yeah.
But understood, like, there is, just like anything, there's a formal process in which you have to go to, much like a demolition permit for a building. If you're removing a facility of that size, you would have to go through the appropriate channels to remove it.
But that was for the added structure for all of them. That's why they were interconnected. Because they had already reached their life 13 years ago. They were 50 years old. So at this point in time, if you take that support away, what does that do to the impact of maybe even your own site if a great wind comes and takes it down? You need 150 feet.
It's not located within 150 feet of not only our building, but our site. So it is off property. And obviously, that would be a concern for creating an air-supported structure, is having something big, tall, and pointy too close to it. So that was taken in. No, it's a good point. I don't mean to belittle a comment. It's more so of, it's a good point, and it was something that they did review with the landowner to make sure it wouldn't create an issue for this application.
Well, I mean, I know that you have to have at least 50 more feet of area for a fall. Alan, you were?
Fall zone.
For a fall zone.
I've had the opportunity to permit a couple of telecommunications facilities for Eversource, and yeah, it's minimum 150, and in different municipalities, Bedford being one, they've enacted ordinance that actually creates an even larger buffer. So it is on somewhat of a town-by-town basis, but there is a hard and fast rule that has been established from a state perspective for that radius, which we meet. Which I think is probably the
know.
important part.
I know that you're safe, but we're looking at the structure as a whole. Now you're dividing it because they were interlocking. And, in my view of this, having worked with this before, is that you compromise it all when you take away the support.
Have the seat here. Let's have the man with a little more knowledge on this.
Pull up that chair.
Not a whole lot. Hi, my name is Tom Monahan, Monahan family, with the owners of the property. And Nick's right, the lot, if you were to look at the plan by the cul-de-sac, is where, it's the other side of the cul-de-sac, is where the antenna, the tower is. They are not, they are interconnected only under the ground. There's some electrical components that come through. They are freestanding. We've received all the FCC approvals to go from 5 towers to 1. We are going to retain the radio stations, are still going to be on the air. And they're also, it's actually has an FM component, and we're going, what do they call it? We're going non-directional. These antennas are all directional. Nighttime, 3 go in one direction, then it switches over during the day, and the other 3, that's the reason for 5. We're going from 5,000 watts down to 250 watts AM, and we have WGAM is in Manchester, is on the air, and FM as well. I don't know, 1033 if you want to listen for your listening pleasure.
Right, we can't give any free plugs.
Yeah, right, but yes, it is freestanding. It is all within the fall zone, as it always has been. Safety regulations, FCC approved, and if you look at it, you'll see the guy wires that are protecting it for its freestanding. The towers are over 50 years old, but they have received a lot of maintenance along the way, and they have another 30 years if we wanted to do that. So I think, the 4 towers are going down anyways, and so, again, we have all the approvals from the FCC.
All right, well, we all learned a little bit about telecommunications towers tonight. Thank you, Joe.
Hey, I have a question for you. In addressing the variance criteria, you talked about the impact to the character of the neighborhood in multiple of the variance criteria that you addressed. Can you explain to me how this height of this type of structure does not impact the character of that area without tying in the towers?
Yes.
Because I don't think that's a fair comparison.
And you had brought that up before, so I kind of took that as a 5th item of homework when we left here.
Smart man.
And I think you heard a little bit of it in our presentation as well, that although that is a component of it, it's not the only component of it. It's evaluating those important sightlines. So we worked with our abutters to make sure that they would not be adversely impacted, because those are important sightlines to them. Important sightlines that were evaluated by this board, we've had the opportunity to show you how those are also mitigated. So you can't create an adverse impact or alter the essential character of the neighborhood if you have the ability to obscure those sightlines. Now, the reality is we have a use that's been approved. So I look at that as saying, okay, I kind of take the use component out of this. So we're really just working at the height of the structure. Is there something about the height of this structure that's really going to essentially change the character of this area? I know we made the reference to the height of the utility poles, but if it's not something that dominates the landscape from a sightline perspective, then it's not going to alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And we hope that our perspectives that we were able to provide show that.
Well, I know a lot of the perspectives that you showed, and maybe it'll be different when the trees are grown larger years down the road, but just the view from some of the areas, some of the properties, just kind of concerns me. And I think it does change the character of those particular areas.
I always try not to ask a question I don't know the answer to, but I'm going to go out on a limb and do it anyway. The question would be, is there a gain to the community by the denial of the request? And when I look at that, this is a great opportunity to bring this type of use, this type of facility to the community where there isn't a burden on your own municipal system. This is a private development. Basically, it supplants the idea of building larger gymnasiums, more sports fields or otherwise within your community. There's now the opportunity for that space within a private development. So from the character of a neighborhood, well, where do you stick a baseball field for your high school kids? Where do you stick a soccer field? A lot of times you see that in your residential communities. In this case, we're in an industrial lot. And we realize we have residential abutters, so we have to be sensitive to that. And that's what the intent is with these landscape plantings, as well as the location of the facility to begin with, is that it's been sited, and you can see that it's tilted at that angle. And by doing so, again, that helps lessen that view shed. So is there a gain to the community by denying this request? I'd say no. Is there something to threaten the public health, safety, or welfare? No. Does it alter the essential character of the neighborhood? The essential character? No. It's gonna be a little different? Yeah. You now have an air-supported structure. But does it alter the essential character? And I'd say the answer to that component would be no.
Yep. Anybody else?
I do appreciate what you've done. Gives me a good visual. Actually, I'm quite surprised, to be honest with you. Because when I first heard this and thinking 75 feet, I'm doing this. And people, we're not gonna be seeing any of the building. It's not like it's on the main street that we're looking straight up. It isn't a distance, it sits 15 feet down. Even without the trees.
Once you make that turn, you're not looking at it anymore, you're looking at the road.
Yeah. I struggle with the height. I did some research myself.
Good.
And to put a soccer field, you're talking a maximum of, well, everything I have from 20, 24, the highest I had was 33 feet.
That was for an air-supported structure or
No,
just
to play soccer, indoor soccer.
to play it well for our elite athletes?
And baseball, 60 feet.
So we would have the opportunity for both of those. It's basically any turf field, so lacrosse,
Yeah.
football, baseball.
And there's a difference in cost building a different type of building, but I believe it can be done, so I'm struggling with that.
I guess what were I think the point that Frank was trying to make when he gave his original opening is, at our last meeting is, this is the business model. They found that they can create this type of use, they can bring it within communities, they can be successful from a business standpoint, and be able to pass that success along to communities so that our youth have the opportunity to play elite sports through the winter, which I think is a pretty special thing. So when we look at this, I always go back to the five-star criteria. Are we able to meet it? Are we creating something contrary to the ordinance? Have we impacted an important view? The health, public safety aspect. And that's why one of the first things we did was we went and sat down with Bill Connor to make sure that, okay, have we checked that box? So what I felt like we were really coming back here for was, from a sightline perspective, are we creating something that's a nuisance to the public? Because that could be contrived as contrary to the spirit of the ordinance, because you're creating a negative impact to the public. I think what we've been able to show you is, from a view shed standpoint, we don't have that negative aspect. And over time, it's only going to improve.
Lynn?
Not at the moment.
Alan?
All set?
John? Sandra?
Yeah, I have one question. I don't know if we asked this the last time, but the sound, since you want to have this up to 11 p.m. at night, is there any sound reduction built into this structure?
Yes, within the membrane itself. So it really serves twofold. One, keeps the light in. Two, keeps the sound in. Three, probably more important to the owners, keeps the heat in.
Yes.
So that R value, that insulated property, much like you would have in your attic, where you have the opportunity to dull that noise, it's a similar property that they have within the membrane, so that the noise within the facility stays within the facility. And those are things we do expect to address the planning board on, because that'll be something they review as part of the site plan approval.
We ready for public hearing? Okay, you guys wouldn't mind stepping back for a minute?
Certainly.
Well, maybe you can wait, maybe there is no comment. Does anybody in the public have any comment that they would like to make regarding this application? Seeing none. Any final comments?
I think if anything, relative to the engineering aspect of this, I hope that we were able to answer your questions. We realize the ultimate decision lies with you, but that we've at least given you the information such that you can make an informed decision. From the comments that I heard somewhat selectively, I believe we provided you with what you were looking for, so I know I feel good about the job that we've done here, and I'm very hopeful that we have the opportunity to move on to the planning board, the next step of this. There's still a lot of things this project will need to accomplish to be actually be constructed, but we're hoping that you'll give us that opportunity this evening.
Well, thank you. Before we start deliberations, I do want to say that your application was very complete, very thorough, and I think you were very accommodating to our questions and our concerns, so I do appreciate that very much.
Good, thank you for letting us know.
Okay, so we will deliberate.
I'm sorry, did you,
Close the public hearing.
okay,
It's closed now.
no, I know, but I know you made a reference to checking with the public for comments, but I don't recall if you actually asked the question.
I
If
did,
there are
I-
any comments.
I did.
Okay, just checking.
I
Thank
did,
you.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You did.
Okay.
Oh, you did?
And now it's, and now
I was
it's closed.
scribbling,
out for a
I was
minute.
scribbling, so I.
That's okay,
sorry
I
about
did the
that.
same. Okay, so where we want to
It
start?
was just a test.
Okay, where do we want to start? You look like you have a lot on your mind.
You know, I have. I wasn't a fan. I'm not gonna kid you. But I don't have a problem with this. I don't have a problem coming into town and seeing them.
Well, and if I mean, I would kind of second Denise, because I was initially very skeptical of the proposal due to the size and the height that we were talking about, but from what I see, every attempt has been made to both accommodate the abutters and to particularly with this, and again, this view, and as Gail said in the initial hearings, the sort of main entrance to Goffstown from the back road. This is not anything that dominates the skyline there, or anything that you're going to give more than a glance to as you drive by. You know, I'm, as I say, positively impressed. I don't see any problems with it. You can't have a project of this size and not have any impact on anybody.
Right.
That's the thing. And looking at the minimal number of residential properties in the area and the attempts that have been made to deal with their issues, I don't have a problem with it either.
And the zoning, it's commercial industrial area.
There's no abutters here, I think it's a problem.
Oh. And there could be many bigger and uglier projects put on that same site.
Alan?
No comment.
John?
It's just that, you know, I thought 75 feet was big, and, you know, we're a small town and we wanted to keep things small. But, you know, I'm new at all this, so how many more buildings are there that are over the 45-foot limit? Is this the first one?
No.
One.
I mean, besides the apartment building that we just did.
Congregational church steeple, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, it's, you know, somebody decided 45 feet was a good number, probably, maybe it's for fire,
Height of a ladder.
a ladder truck. You know, which I understand this one doesn't need a ladder truck, won't be a problem. But you know, if that's why it's a 45-foot limit, then I think this is okay. If it's because we don't want tall stuff in town, then I struggled with it since the last meeting, wondering, you know, are we setting a precedent so the next guy wants 85 feet?
Somebody will probably ask,
Well,
but each application is on its
On its
own
own.
criteria, so,
So, but it is a piece of land that's, not much is happening on. And it will, I think it'll be many more people than Goffstown using this facility, but it's on the fringes of the town line, so we're not gonna have a lot of people transiting through, more than likely.
I think there are still a lot of issues, as he indicated it, but they're planning board and
Right.
site review
Right.
So there is
issues,
some
traffic being among them, things
some
like that, but
conditional
they're not
use.
our purview.
Because it's over 50,000 square feet?
Yes,
Where does that come from? Planning board?
planning board.
So I do have one question. If we were to grant the variance for 75 feet, can we restrict it to this type of building?
Well,
So if something happens in 5 years and they decide they don't want to do it, now this piece of property has a variance for a building that's 75 feet tall.
Good point.
As presented.
Okay.
Nancy?
Motion should contain as presented.
Which would be for an air-supported structure.
Nancy?
I was just going to add that the board could potentially arrive at a completely different decision if the structure was of a different style, other than an air-supported structure with the same variance request as to height. So it is, you know, it is as presented, and whenever an issue like making any changes to what was approved by the zoning board, that's something we always look at. Doesn't necessarily need to be as obvious as this, but there are other circumstances where it's quite possible that the zoning board may not have arrived at the same decision had certain pieces of that presentation be changed. You know, whether it's hours of operation, or whether it's, you know, style of building, height of building, all the pieces fall together, and in the end, you have one decision or the other, and most often, the presentation, you know, is a large part of how the
Right.
zoning board arrived at a particular decision.
The zoning ordinance actually say that even if it's not a condition, if something is represented here, that's what they're bound to. That's my summary, that's not its exact words, but.
And I would send them back to zoning board if the building style changed.
Okay.
Well, anybody want to make a motion? One way or the other?
I'll go for it. I motion to grant the variance to allow a maximum building height of 75 feet, where a maximum building height of 45 feet is permitted, concerning Section 3.11 Table of Principal Uses and Section 4.3 Table of Dimensional Regulations of the Goffstown zoning ordinance, as presented in these last 3 meetings.
Can, okay, can we add a couple of things?
Certainly can,
Or
please
let-
do.
talk about adding a couple of
Mhm.
things? I know you said as presented, but I would also like to specify that it's an air-supported structure.
Yes?
And I would like to specify that the landscaping that they are proposing is always maintained, so that if something dies, that it is going to be replaced or whatever, so that these abutters always have the,
And I believe the planning board will put that in.
Right.
That they, if the tree dies at 20 feet tall, they gotta replace them.
so.
20-foot tip.
I would like that as a condition. The planning board may come back with some landscaping plans that are more stringent, and that's fine. But if theirs are less stringent, I would like ours to be combined
Okay,
with them.
Sure, definitely.
So I can say specifically, and then note your 2 items
Yep.
on top of, as presented during the last 3 meetings.
Yep.
And we discussed no graphics on this thing, right? At one of the previous meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Signage.
Um,
That would be signs and.
Yeah, that's planning board. Okay, so we have Denise made the motion and Ellen seconded the motion. We have the conditions, and all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimous.
I love those ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your
Good
time
job.
and effort.
Thank you for your work.
You did a good job.
You
Nick.
did.
Thank you.
I would,
Because I know you.
once the structure was set, that it was dependent upon that, then
That's where you hide it, huh?
Recycling bin.
Yeah, I don't save them anymore. Okay, our next application is S&H Land Services LLC, Tom Hewitt, LLS applicant, and Betty Martell, and 23 Church Street LLC owners are seeking a variance to allow for a lot line adjustment between two properties that will increase the nonconformity of one of the lots, map 34, lot 94. The variance is required because lot 94, already nonconforming due to lot size, will decrease in area from 10,670 square feet to 8,090 square feet. And for section 4.3 of the Goffstown zoning ordinance, the lot is required to have 43,560 square feet or 1 acre. The properties are located at 6 Campbell Court, map 34, lot 94, and 23 Church Street, map 34, lot 92. Lot 94 is zoned commercial industrial flex zone, and lot 92 is zoned commercial, village commercial. And we have, who do we have here?
My name's Tom Hewitt. I'm land surveyor and owner of S&H Land Services. And I'm here with Betty Martell, her and her family own the properties that we're dealing with tonight.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you are looking to do?
Sure. So historically, basically the properties are located on Campbell Court and Church Street. The 23 Church Street is the Putnam Fuel Building, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Betty's family has owned that since sometime in the 80s when they moved the office there. Her old grandmother's house and another property they own are the two buildings across Campbell Court. The lot we are proposing to do the lot line adjustment with is number 6, which is an existing 3-family house. That's been in Betty's family's probably since the 40s. When they purchased 23 Church Street back in the 80s, sometime after that, they constructed a garage, which is shown on the southwest portion right here, if I can point to it. And the existing lot line is this red line here. So basically, the existing 3-family has an L-shaped lot. This is the existing lot for the Putnam Fuel. And so the garage was constructed on the lot where the 3-family is, but it has always been historically used by Putnam Fuel. And in fact, you can't access the garage without going onto that property. So what Betty is hoping to do with her family is to do a lot line adjustment that would place the new lot line extending straight down. So the garage would now be on the property with Putnam Fuel. Doing that, the existing 3-family is already non-conforming at about 10,600 square feet. That would reduce it by about 2,800 square feet down to 8,000. So we are looking for relief in lot area to reduce the size of the existing 3-family house down to approximately 8,090 square feet. We feel this is a reasonable request, as since it's been constructed, the garage has never been used with that house, and it hasn't been. I think it's pretty straightforward. I can go through the criteria if you want. There's obviously, in our opinion, no harm to the public because nothing's changing short of where the lot line is. We're not proposing to construct anything new. We're trying to put the use of the garage with how it's being used.
Okay. I would appreciate it if you would go through the
Sure.
criteria, just for the record, please.
Absolutely. So we are requesting a variance from section 4.3, the table of dimensional regulations for minimum lot size for lot, tax map 34, lot 94, reducing it from 10,670 square feet to 8,090 square feet. The variance would not be contrary to the public interest because even though the lot size is being reduced, there are several lots in the surrounding neighborhood with similar conditions to what is being proposed. This application does not present a threat to the public health, safety, or welfare. Again, we're not proposing to change anything. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. The existing 3-family home on map 34, lot 94 is already non-conforming, a non-conforming use on a non-conforming lot for the CIFZ zone. The proposed lot line adjustment would only remove a small portion of the property. The loss of that portion of the property would have no impact on the existing use of the property, as again, historically, it's always been used by Putnam Fuel. Substantial justice would be done because the garage has historically been used by map 34, lot 92. Granting the variance would allow the lot line to be changed so that the property owners will actually own the land that they're occupying. The values of surrounding properties would not be diminished because, again, there's no proposed construction associated with this variance. The lot line adjustment would have no impact on abutting properties. We're not actually asking to change anything except the lot line. Little enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship because of the special conditions of the property that distinguishes it from other properties in the area. And no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general purpose of the ordinance provisions and the specific application of that provision to the property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one. So again, the CIFZ zone is established to encourage larger scale commercial industrial parks, light industry, and commercial services, and the minimum lot size required in the zone reflects this. The property in question, however, is already too small to reasonably support such a use, has an existing use that is non-compatible with the zone, and instead fits the character of the surrounding residential and village commercial zones. It's reasonable to annex the land the garage sits on to the property of those that actually use it.
Does anybody have questions?
Now, you say this garage has never been used for the existing house that it's with on this property. And is it a storage area for large vehicles for you,
It's,
for
uh,
this company?
It's where we house all of our inventory for the company,
Okay.
for our service parts.
Gail, I'll motion that there's no regional impact.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Second.
Okay.
Get that one under.
Yeah.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. Now we can go back to, anybody have questions regarding this application or the variance criteria?
I think it's pretty cut and dry, and it has
Yeah.
no effect on
It's just
being used that way anyways,
line.
and
move. That's it.
if we're gonna sell the property, it would be an issue. and I don't see any issues at all.
Making the map reflect the reality of use.
Okay. So nobody has questions, Alan?
Nope.
All right, John?
I'm just, probably just a question, but not really probably appropriate, but the gray section in the middle, is that a town parking? What are those parking
So-
spaces?
So
I may
Campbell
ask.
Court is the right-of-way, which is, I'll show you on this.
Right.
Okay, so this is Campbell Court, so that's the road, and this gray area is the parking for the Putnam Fuel Building.
So, but is that gray area part of the land?
This part is, yes. This
Oh,
is, in the
okay.
Campbell Court's a right-of-way, so it's not part of either property.
Oh, okay, so it's a right. All right, that makes sense, then. It just looked like kind of a gerrymandered lot, but it actually is fairly orthogonal.
Right.
Okay.
Subdivision just gonna reflect exactly what is going on.
Okay. No more questions, comments, or anything? All right, we will open the application to comment from the public. Anybody back there have any comments they want to make? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed, and we will deliberate.
I don't see any issue with this.
No issues? No comments, questions,
It's
anybody?
when nice, easy variances come in.
Motion? Motion?
I move that the variance be granted as requested.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
It's an easy one.
Wish they were.
Okay, and next we have. Those already. That's Nancy. Let me give that back to her. I don't want to forget to give that back to her. Don't move back too far. I don't want you to be tripping over my stuff. Okay. Next and last application for this evening.
Nancy, can we steal a chair?
Oh, yes. We have TF Moran applicant And Lead Development LLC owner seeking the following variances from the Goffstown zoning ordinance. Variance under section 3.11, table of principal uses, to permit construction of multifamily housing in the commercial district. Variance under section 4.3, table of dimensional regulations, to allow construction of 33 multifamily residential units, whereas 31 are permitted. And variance under section 4.3, table of dimensional regulations, and section 15.3.5, construction on a lot without frontage, to allow construction on a lot whose only road frontage is a private way, whose sole access to the private way is via a private access easement over an abutting parcel. The property is located off Mast Road, behind 585 Mast Road, Franklin Savings Bank, and is generally referred to as Land Unit 2, map 18, lot 60-2, on approved and recorded consolidation and condominium site plan for Abington Place, zoned commercial. And good evening, welcome, and if you wouldn't mind identifying yourself, please, for the record.
I guess I'll start while we're getting set up. I'm Dylan Cruz with Lead Development, one of the owners of this existing parcel. And with us, we have Jennifer Vadney and Robert Turney, both of NeighborWorks, Southern New Hampshire, and Jason Hill.
Robert Tierney, did you say?
Attorney, Tourigny.
Okay, thank you.
If we need to go refer to the board, but.
Okay.
I guess while this is going on, just for general history of the project, it was originally, or not originally, but it was given to St. Anselm College, the Order of St. Benedict, in 2006. And at that time, my family and partners were involved in permitting the mixed-use development known as Abingdon Square. So it was in the 2008-2009 timeframe when Rite Aid was approved and built. And as part of that approval, then there was an residential component behind it,
Yep.
which is actually an existing 25-unit NeighborWorks townhouse development. And there was a small park in front, and then there was basically this piece of vacant land to behind the road in between where the NeighborWorks existing development is. Over the years, so this is going back now just about 10 years, it has gone through a few iterations. AutoZone was very close in 2014. They in fact pulled a building permit, but then came back and said that they felt it was too far removed from Mast Road and their visibility was not sufficient for what they wanted, so they pulled out of the project. It has been essentially vacant for 10 years. We have tried many different types of commercial users, from fast food to an urgent care facility to office building, and no one has agreed to locate that far back from Mast Road. So then come 2018, the Franklin Savings Bank decided that they were very interested in the site, and they actually were able to locate where the park used to be. And now they've been open, I think, since March of 19, so we're almost a year since then. There has still been no commercial activity, and in our discussions with NeighborWorks, their existing facility or project has been very successful, and they have decided that they would be interested in doing a second phase of their existing townhouse workforce development. I guess, would you like to hear kind of an overview of NeighborWorks, or should we go through
Well,
variance?
Well, we'll start with that in just a minute. I do want to make sure that you are aware that we received a comment from the planning board. They have the right per the zoning ordinance to comment to the zoning board on applications such as yours. So they want to exercise that right. So we will not be making any decision tonight. We can hear your application,
Okay.
but then we would continue it to a future time, probably the meeting in February. Hopefully, the planning board would have had a chance to review and comment back to us so that we could continue on with this in February. So I just wanted you to know that before we
We
get
do
started.
understand that. We probably, like you, found out today
Yes.
that they were going to exercise that, that part.
They have
so-
30 days, so they'll have no choice but to be ready for the next meeting, correct?
Yeah, they're supposed to, well, 30 days from the time they get the application, they don't have the application yet.
But they knew about it, so. It always gets me. They don't know, they don't have it, but they know enough to tell us that they want it.
Well, they only heard about it today,
Oh.
so they don't have the application, but they heard about it. So I don't know how, and not that it's a secret or anything like that, because it's not, but they do want to,
Do they meet next?
they meet Thursday. So they may be able to discuss it on Thursday. It won't have been in their packets that they, although Thursday is also zoning amendment public hearing, so I don't know.
Our hope tonight, knowing that you would not be able to vote, was to get your feedback and try to answer any questions that you might have. So-
Are you still able to provide feedback and comments?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure. Then you can come back armed for bear. If you need to be.
Okay.
Okay, so if you want to continue on,
At this point, I would either turn it over to NeighborWorks to give you an overview of their existing project and their organization as a whole, or turn it over to Jason for the criteria.
I think we're going to go straight to the criteria kind of thing. We want to beeline it for the application itself.
I can hand this out if necessary, but it's on the screen behind you. I have a few graphics. One is this close-up view of the development. This is, if you're familiar with this area of town, is Pinardville. Rite Aid is to the left, the building to the left. The Franklin Savings Bank is down below. The existing NeighborWorks 25-unit complex is the top of the screen. That's Mystic Brook Way. The middle of the property is currently vacant land that was graded and such. There's utilities running through there and things like that. And that's the site of the proposed project. It's a roughly 2-acre parcel with Abingdon Way as a access to provide access to two condominium land units, one being the Franklin Savings Bank to the south, which is 60-1, and we are 60-2. They share, like I said, this common Abingdon Way access with a full access driveway at the existing signalized intersection with Mast Road. We have a easement with Rite Aid, and there's an existing easement that controls that intersection, providing access, permanent access and egress through that section of frontage, or through that corridor, to access Mast Road. And the existing NeighborWorks also has a one-way in on the right-hand side. It's like a slip right. Yeah.
Right-hand turn only.
Yep. And that's a one-way towards their development. Abingdon Way is a two-way drive. And Mystic Way is a cul-de-sac with a dead-ended road. This is just, I'm gonna put up a fuller, smaller scale version that shows the neighborhood in general here. So you can see the scale of our development relative to the surroundings. Then we have the former, there was a Shaw's shopping plaza to the left, where there's now the big lots. And there's some mixed retail and commercial uses in that large shopping plaza, and Pizza Hut, and you have a McDonald's along the corridor, some miscellaneous commercial. Then the Rite Aid in the center of the parcel, our development in color in the middle, our proposed development, and the bank again, and the existing NeighborWorks above us. And then there, obviously, you have the Hannaford Plaza directly to the east. mixed housing and commercial to the south along Pinardville, along Mass Road. That's a mixed district here. So you have a nice corridor. We have a nice mixed-use corridor with sidewalk interconnectivity between many of the uses in the residential. So this is in, as I look at it, you'd have a nice mixed-use district in town that's mixed, comprised of the various different types of uses here. And we're looking to expand an existing use for NeighborWorks that's on lot 60, or map 60, or map 18, lot 60-2, the 25 existing housing units directly to the north, which makes a very feasible and attractive proposed expansion to the south into this existing land condo unit, which would provide 33 new housing units of great demand in the current market. And these would be affordable housing, mix of 5-unit and 7-unit buildings. I believe you're looking at 4 7-unit buildings and a single 5-unit building, and the mix is 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom. A majority of the units being 2-bedroom. It's a 2-story structure looking like this. Some representative photograph. It's an attractive looking structure. These are some examples of the existing. So this is.
The lights.
Oh, yeah, you're okay.
This is actually the existing Abingdon Way development that's directly.
Is that what the proposed is gonna look like as well?
We're proposing a
Correct.
similar architecture to match,
Okay.
so it's a nice attractive looking unit. These would have parking in front. This is the actual current NeighborWorks site that we're proposing to, develop on this adjacent land unit.
So are these rentals or condominiums?
Rentals.
Rentals, okay.
Here's just another look up Mystic Way from, basically the edge of our current site, the central portion of the vacant land. So looking northwest towards New Boston. This is looking directly at it. The front elevation view of, I believe this site is in London. Is this?
This is in Londonderry, yeah, but we included this one because it's a 7-unit building, and we'll have 7-unit buildings in the proposed project.
So this is the massing that we'd be looking, at replicating. And then this is the last photograph I'll show you, which is the Goffstown site, looking across this vacant field, which this field would then be infilled with similar style, units.
The plains of Pinardville.
We've applied for a few variances, one of which my understanding is that the legal counsel was going to potentially determine if it was actually feasible, or not, I shouldn't say feasible, but applicable to the project. It's related to the frontage itself. Since this is a land condo, having frontage off of Mass Road, that's one aspect of the frontage that, with condos, they're kind of their own little animal in terms of how the regulations rely on. But in terms of looking at whether the variance was required to develop this lot, having no frontage on Mass Road, this condominium land unit having access off of Abingdon Way, which is a private way that has an easement, a permanent access easement to a Class 5 road being Mass Road. There was some type of potential language in the variance where there was a potential variance needed to develop this parcel. So I applied for that because it was determined that it was a potential variance. One of the things.
I can speak to that.
So if we're going to continue, I can talk briefly about how that applies to our project and how the road frontage requirements are met by what we're proposing.
Okay,
Unless Nancy wants
Nancy,
to.
do you wanna
Sure.
talk about that?
So I've had a couple of conversations and with Jason, and so I did review the frontage question with the town's legal counsel, and he's been right out straight with court dockets, and so he wasn't able to put anything in writing for this evening. But at this point in time, he's pretty confident in saying that a variance from the town's frontage requirement is definitely necessary. The other question that we had was whether the state statute for frontage also applies, RSA 674-41. And at this point in time, it's looking like that does not apply. But if the application is going to be continued, then certainly by the next meeting, we'll have something in writing. And he was very apologetic that he did not have it available for this evening, but.
Okay, well, we do know it's gonna be continued, so, we can go through the variance criteria for this if you'd like, and
Yeah,
then we
it's
can follow through with
Just
it.
like, go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just one thing I meant to add is, I would suggest to save everyone a little time that, just at this point in time, have the applicant, have Jason address the, variance criteria for the zoning ordinance, and not address at this point, the variance or the waiver under the statutory language, which is section 5 of the ZBA application. And by the time that we have see the application again, then if legal counsel determines that, yes, indeed, we should have him, have the applicant present that request, then, you know, he could do that, or, you know, I don't want to put anyone through unnecessary effort, and based on conversations I've had with legal counsel, I feel pretty confident that the waiver from the statute will not be necessary. It's just a recommendation thought.
Okay, Alan?
Ask Bob, what did we have to do the last time? Because I was chairman of the board when it went through.
I'm trying to think back. We're talking about 13 years ago, I think, when we came to the
that
Economic
old.
Development Task Force and
I
talked
don't
about the
believe
need
I
for,
don't believe we had any wrinkles.
no.
Well, that parcel has frontage along Mast Road in this little flag.
It's a
So
narrow parcel, a
I-
narrow, skinny little track that runs out to Mass Road.
That met the
That
frontage
meets the frontage
requirements.
To the
requirement.
flag lot.
Yep.
The-
Even though our development is further away from Mast Road, we maintain that little strip of land coming up
So
between us
why-
and the Hannaford.
So why wouldn't you want to take and purchase a property and then consolidate it with what you already have? And therefore it disappears.
Good question.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
If we could, we would, but we end up, the way we finance all of our development activity is through separate entities, limited partnerships that are comprised of different investors and lenders.
Yeah.
And so, until both properties have been built and matured for 15 years, we don't have any flexibility to merge them.
Okay.
And so, for the life of the project, for the first 15 years of the project, they have to be able to live and work independently, even though we'll call them sister projects, we'll treat them like sister projects.
Yeah.
Legally, they have to remain separate entity structures.
Understood, okay. Answers my question, thank you.
That's a very good question.
Okay, then, are you ready to go ahead with the,
Yeah, it sounds like I'm gonna skip over this frontage and go right to the use and the density variances. So that's the direction that we wanna go in.
and we still want to do the variance for this?
The variance with reference to the town's frontage requirement.
The variance with, so that you'll address the variance for the town, the variance for the town frontage requirement, as well as the number of units and, what was your third one?
It's
The-
just
the-
density.
Okay,
So don't proceed with section 5 of the zoning board application this evening.
But they wanted me to talk about it, it sounds like.
Yeah.
It's a different, it's a different animal, it's very confusing, it's the statutory reference, that section 5 addresses, which has to do with frontage, but, just, you can proceed with, the 5 variance criteria, which is something different from,
Yes,
yeah, so
related to the frontage.
it is related to the frontage, just ignore section 5
Okay.
of the zoning, board application.
So, related to the use and the density variances, I'm gonna talk about first, and it ties in with the frontage variance. The argument is tied together for the use and density, so I'd like to speak to them together. And they'll speak to different aspects of, the density I'll bring up in certain portions of the argument. And it's similar to the written argument that I've submitted to this date. Really, these variances for the use and density are to section, it's the table of permitted uses, principal uses, which is section 311A3, which is for a multifamily residential use to be developed into a commercial district. It's a non-permitted use. And the second variance related to the use density, I say, is to section 4.3. That's the table of dimensional regulations of density. And that's the density for a residential development in a commercial district, being 15 dwelling units per acre. So there's the 5 criteria that relate to these variances. The first of which is the public interest, which is really anything to do with how this project affects the rights, any rights of the general public. It's really how this fits in with, it's similar to the spirit or how this development fits in with the confines of the existing neighborhood, if it changes the character of the neighborhood. Now, this project is very much in the public interest, especially currently. There's been a high demand around the state, especially the south and the southeast, but everywhere in the state for affordable housing. It's been publicized highly recently by the governor, many, political and state, officials. There's housing costs are high, unaffordable for many just blue collar and white collar, low white collar, workers, public workers, police, fire, school system. There's a high demand. This project will allow this town to have a greater capacity for this, to fulfill this demand, which will benefit the public. And along that vibe, this neighborhood, which is a mixed use, like walkable community, this residential use, which already exists in this neighborhood, will just greater enhance the nature and the existing context of the various uses. There's very close proximity to walkable through the existing sidewalk networks. You can walk to Hannaford to get groceries. You can walk to the gym. You can walk to certain restaurants, as well as there's a new medical office at the corner of Daniel Plummer. So we have an emerging mixed use area. And this will fit in nicely with that and also fulfill a public need, a good role that's lacking in the existing market. This, as Dylan stated, there's been several former attempts to develop this parcel, commercial development, retail development. Limited, what they've found and experienced is that the retail developers find that there's limited sight lines or visibility into the site from this intersection, and they want presence on the corridor. These commercial and other developers like to have a greater presence, which they feel is not being established due to the existing like road network and such. So as such, this site has remained idle for a decade or more, which is deemed to be against the public interest in and of itself. So the reasonable development of this property and generation of a tax revenue is another benefit to the public. And as I said, the workforce housing use is, you know, the main benefit of this project to the public. So those are the reasons where we are a benefit to the public interest. The second criteria is similar to the first, and that's related to the spirit, that this project does not conflict with the spirit or the intent of the ordinance. As I stated, this is an existing user on the existing abutting property. It's established and it's an attractive use. We're proposing similar style buildings of reasonable height and mass that blend in with the existing massing and architecture, which will not alter the character of the neighborhood in any way, and I think will enhance the character of the neighborhood as we hope to do. So that is the main rationale for the meeting of the second criteria for this use. The substantial justice is a third criteria that we're looking to establish. That's requires showing that the harm to the applicant, if the variance is denied, is greater than the harm to the public if the harm is granted. We do not foresee any significant harm to the public if the variance is granted for some of the statements I've made earlier, and that this will fulfill a much-needed role in the community. We'll generate some tax revenues, pay impact fees, which will help offset any public service use that will, you know, be generated by this development. Also, the idleness of the site as being proposed for retail or other uses over the past decade plus, you know, lends itself to the nature of this is a suitable use for the property. We have a user that's a good user, that's an established user in the existing community that wants to do something with this property, and substantial justice would be done to the public as well as to our client if this was granted. The fourth is diminution of the surrounding, or the value of surrounding properties not being diminished by this project. It ties a lot to the former aspects of the project where we have an established use existing on an adjacent parcel. We're not bringing in a new user. This is an attractive architectural entity, so to speak. We are not changing the character of the neighborhood and will blend in with what's there already. And the residential use is permitted in certain, is permitted on the adjacent parcel. So it blends in with the existing uses in this neighborhood that exists today. Finally, this is the hardship criteria, is the fifth criteria that I'd like to talk about. And this site is unique from many sites in the area in that we have an existing permitted use on the abutting parcel that likes to expand its use to occupy this parcel in the commercial district where we don't have a permitted residential use. We have a history of other uses on this property other than residential being non-viable. AutoZone was approved, they filed for a building permit. They left and did not go through with their project due to sight line constraints. The bank did not want to develop in the middle of the parcel because of the presence that was lacking on Mast Road. Other developments we have experienced have had the same sentiment about occupying this central parcel for commercial style developments. So this site has sat vacant for many years. and paid taxes on them for many years as well. And now we have a viable user, like to expand an existing use on the existing neighboring parcel. It's a perfect use for this neighborhood. And the unique character of the corridor and sight lines in and of itself lends itself to the residential development, and that's what makes this a unique case. Now, the unit density, in terms of why the 33 units is required, is really driven by the fact that we're doing a residential use. The economic viability required slightly higher residential densities to support the increased construction costs that we'd be having for this residential development to the developer. So to make it a viable to the developer, where they're actually having a net plus benefit, and, you know, they can have the money to construct, we need the additional density to support that, to get the additional unit costs down. So that is the purpose for the additional ask for those additional 2 units from 31 is what would be permitted to 33 is what's being proposed. We feel that there's no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose and the specific application of that provision to the property. And then denial of this variance, you know, really would provide a hardship to our client, because it would deny them the opportunity to expand a successful existing conforming use on the neighboring property. And it's a reasonable use for the reasons I've stated prior, you know. So that's the argument for those 2 uses. And if you'd like to go through this individual argument for the frontage, I could talk to that now.
Well, before we move on to that, I know we have, I can't find the other 2. I know we have 2 letters. One is from
Yes.
Rite Aid and one is for, I had seen them, I had just,
Paper clipped to.
We also have one from the school.
right, and I wanted to get to those. We had 2 letters, one was from the bank and one was from Rite Aid, both in favor of the application. And then we had one from the school. Are you familiar with that one?
Yes.
Okay, where they voted unanimously to oppose the zoning change because the Bartlett Elementary School is currently overcrowded and at capacity. So we have those comments that these will be in the file as well.
For clarification on the school letter, I did look online and I found the school board meeting minutes. And if I'm connecting the dots appropriately, it appears that the meeting minutes where they discussed that was about a previous application. It spoke about 48 units and over 55. So unless there was right, yep, I believe they're referencing a different, same site, different project.
Different concept.
Correct.
And I can speak a little more to that. Prior, say, 6 months ago, we were talking to a residential multifamily apartment developer. So we actually went to the technical review committee,
Right.
showing 2 24-unit garden-style buildings. And even just in discussions with staff, before the school board ever even met with them, we had withdrawn that application, just because we felt the density was too high. So the school board, it is a very general letter saying they're not in favor of really any more residential, but that, the project they were reviewing was the 48-unit concept.
Right.
And then also as a piece that these, even with approval, even if we get the variance approved, then we go through the planning and site review process, NeighborWorks wouldn't be looking to construct until 2021 for possible school children in 2022.
Correct.
So, at least I know, I live in Bedford, and class sizes, the school can be overcrowded just because you have one really big class moving through a school district. I think we've looked and the school numbers have not gone up incredibly high. But it does tax a school if you have one class that's moving through a school, so.
Alan?
Bob?
Yeah.
Does this project pay impact fees and taxes?
Lots.
That's what I thought I heard.
You're right.
We pay, you have the, Jennifer has the Goffstown number, but, yeah, last year we paid, $641,000 in real estate taxes in our portfolio. so.
And I did look it up since 2010, we've paid $320,000 in real estate taxes on phase one.
And in,
Thank you.
and in relation to that, currently the site is taxed at about $6,400 a year. So the tax and benefit to the school, getting like 55% of that revenue already would be positive.
Density calculations. How do you get by is this a mixed-use development, or what are you declaring it as?
Multifamily residential development within the commercial district.
No, but it's a mixed-use condominium.
It started out as a mixed-use development when it was the St. A's parcel.
Yes.
And you looked at the Rite Aid piece, the Franklin Savings piece.
Mhm.
This piece was supposed to be commercial, and we were the residential component
Yeah.
of a planned unit development
Yeah.
with a mixed-use purpose. So as everyone has commented, the mixed use in the middle has just never taken seed, and so it's just been a vacant property for a long period of time, and it's time for us to pull the trigger and try to make something happen
Yeah,
there.
but
So
isn't it still a mixed-use development?
still a mixed use development.
It is these two parcels, which are the Franklin Savings Bank and the back parcel, were created as a land condominium last year. And I think the condo docs say it as a mixed-use condominium, but I do not, none of the lawyers I've talked to say that references the Goffstown zoning. Because it then goes, the town lists it as commercially
Zoned
zoned
commercial.
property. That's what tax bills say, that's what the zoning maps say. It lists it as commercial units in the rest of the condominium declaration. I think it is in part coincidence that there's both a mixed-use zoning district and it says mixed use. That's what the lawyers have said.
Nancy?
So the zoning, we don't have a mixed-use district per se, there's not an overlay district that's called that, but there is the option of, in certain zoning districts, including in the commercial district, to present a project as a mixed-use development, and there are guidelines as to how to do that. It addresses density only, there are some different sections in the zoning ordinance that look at density, which conflict with one another with respect to mixed-use development. In moving forward with different projects, it became obvious that looking at the two land condominiums as parcels as a mixed-use development with the Franklin Savings Bank now constructed in the front parcel, with this parcel that we're talking about this evening as the, say, residential component. So the two uses together would comprise a mixed-use development. It doesn't work with the zoning ordinance with respect to the size of the buildings that are allowed in a mixed-use development, where the residential or the multifamily component cannot exceed the square footage of the non-residential component. In this case, the Franklin Savings Bank has a footprint of 3,000 square feet, a little less than that. So through this process, it was pretty evident that presenting this as part of a mixed-use development doesn't work. So the next step would be to present it to the zoning board as looking at just this parcel as multifamily in a commercial district which the only way you can do that is by way of mixed-use development, which had already been explored, or requesting essentially a use variance from the zoning board. And then we go to the table of dimensional regulations to determine what the density is for multifamily in the commercial district, which is 15 dwelling units per acre, which establishes the allowable density of 31 units, and they
Need 33.
need 33 in order, NeighborWorks needs 33 in order for their project to be feasible.
Because there's a footnote on that table of dimensional uses that reduces that density to 10 per acre
For a mixed-use development.
for a mixed-use development. That's why I'm asking the question.
But there's another section, and this is something that Joanne and I are gonna be tackling for next zoning amendment season. There's the section that addresses mixed-use development. It talks about density not in number of dwelling units per acre, but in relation to the size of the non-residential use that's part of the mixed-use development. And it's section 5.9 in your zoning ordinance. And the last paragraph, it says, in the commercial and commercial industrial flex zone districts where multifamily dwelling units are also allowed in residential buildings, and then it talks about another scenario on the ground floor, mixed occupancy building. The gross square footage of the residential use shall not be larger than the gross square footage of the non-residential use. So in this case, we'd be talking about residential buildings or building, and then as compared to the non-residential use, which is the bank. So the square footage of the bank is 3,000 square feet. So a multifamily residential as part of a mixed-use project with a non-residential building that doesn't even total 3,000 square feet of gross floor square footage does. It makes the ability to do a mixed-use development with on this site. Just not.
So the history of this property did allow for a mixed use and in different phases, am I correct? Back in, when it was first approved in 2007?
Your original submittal was as a mixed-use development
was.
with
Correct.
residential, commercial,
And it
retail.
had different phases, and that's been kind of taken out of order. There should have been 3 commercial buildings put in prior to any housing.
No,
2.
That-
no.
Park.
2. You've got phase 1, let me see. The park, and the building.
Phase 1 was essentially Rite Aid in the park.
Yep.
I don't know if phase 2 was supposed to be the commercial retail, essentially in the exact area we're talking about now.
Also included were
Okay,
multifamily
and then
units in
3
phase 3.
was,
We were supposed to be last.
you were
Yeah.
supposed to be last. And
I'm very protective of commercial property in this town. I'm gonna tell you right now, you're coming back, so you know my feeling on it. We have the residential component, I agree, we need it in this town. I don't like to see it on the main corridor when we have the infrastructure. It's so limited for commercial property in this town, and it's being taken up by residential development, and we're gonna run out of commercial and industrial property. There's no question about it. We're not gonna run out of places we can put residential housing. I'm a little concerned that the bank, when you put the bank in, that did not help your site to that piece of property.
No, that is true.
So, I have an issue with that. I understand the park wasn't used much, but, to me, it would be nice to see a nice commercial development there, intertwined with, residential, which is what the plan was. I'm gonna struggle with that, and I'm being very open to you.
I would
Can I-
agree.
I guess just briefly, another factor in the park was it was starting to become a very big liability risk. There were bottles, there were needles in the park, so the park needed to be closed because it was a privately owned park. So there was that, and the other, I agree, back in '07, '08, when this was approved, we thought this would be a home run for commercial. It has been actively marketed for 10 years, and everybody, there was AutoZone that Jason alluded to that actually got approved and pulled a building permit until they just decided to pull out. There was Goodyear Tire was another one that was pretty far along the way, and they all, in the end, came back saying it was too far away from Mast Road, and we have not had any, we went for the urgent care that wound up going down on Daniel Plummer. We were talking to them too. And even though that access is really hard to get to, you see the building, but it's hard to get to. They said they're going there. We've had Aroma Joe's look at it, and everybody says it's too far back from the road. And we would love to, if there are office commercial users of some variety, we have tried to seek them out over 10 years and have not been able to find anybody almost at any price. They just say the visibility isn't what they want it to be, thanks. So I think here where we have an opportunity to have workforce housing, which does make payment in lieu of taxes, and it's...
No, we pay taxes.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
not
I
payment in
thought-
lieu of
okay,
taxes. We pay
okay.
taxes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
we pay
would
taxes.
agree with you. I mean, as the abutter, we're the abutter tonight, and we have wanted nothing more than to see this portion of the mixed-use development get completed, help us defray the costs of maintaining this private road. And so I think Dylan's point about they've been actively marketing it for commercial use for over 10 years, and no one has bitten at the apple. So we're here tonight as the applicant, really as second fiddle. No one else wants this site. No one else wants to develop it commercially. So let us take a shot at doing it residential and continue the infill and make it a viable project for the town. So it's not for a lack of trying, and we have seen so many concepts come before us and go. The medical office building, for one. I mean, our tenants have even said, geez, it'd be nice if you built out and got rid of that the plains of Pinardville or the plateau of Pinardville that sits in front of our property. So I think any of those commercial uses would have been appealing to us, but nothing has panned out, and so like we're here as the alternative. So.
If I may, to kind of argue the other side from Denise, I've been a taxpayer in this town for 30 years. I'd like nothing more than to see a nice large commercial development go in there. But the realities of what the market are and what you've just outlined, we don't have a lot of commercial property, yes, but how long can we ask owners to sit on a property and not try to do anything with it while we're waiting for that? The town, there is revenue that the town would be to the benefit of the town by developing it. Yeah, it might be commercial someday, but that might be 10, 15, or 20 years down the line. And I think it seems it's a well-thought-out project that's, worth considering for the site. I just think that if it's been marketed for 10 years and nobody wants it, it's time to do something with it.
Yeah, there's two things going on in my mind, and they kind of conflict a little bit. And one is the 10 years is understandable that, you know, you've been trying to market it, and when you stop to consider that you haven't been able to do anything, and then we have the likes of Shaw's, which has all but vacated, you know, there's very few things in there. Few things are starting to come in now, but there's still a lot of empty space there. You know, I can understand the difficulties. But the other thing is, I have to kind of agree with the school department. I've heard their presentations to the budget committee on how overcrowded they really are, and the numbers that are coming in. And that is a real problem, and I realize you'd be paying impact fees and you'd be paying your taxes, but that doesn't alleviate the
Impact to the
the impact to the schools, because they are so overcrowded right now that they have, they're, in the preschools at Glen Lake, they're using hallways as activity places for the students. They are using every closet space for a learning space. So it is really, really bad, so I understand where the school is coming from as well.
Seems to me if we're not gonna have a moratorium on building in this town, the schools need to deal with it. I mean.
Correct.
I mean, I don't get it. I mean, that letter to me, when I read it, I'm like, really? The town's growing.
You could
Well,
build
it-
something. We could
Okay,
build
well, that's a
that.
discussion for another time, and maybe for the
Okay.
deliberative session or something like that, but maybe at some point something has to be done, but it's not a quick fix. And it's not gonna be fixed before something like this would be built.
We're talking a couple of
And,
years.
and I would submit too, and granted that you folks do pay taxes, but if you're paying $6,500 a year on that development, that's about the tax bill on one single-family residential home in Gloucester.
That's the vacant land.
That's a vacant
The
lot.
vacant lot.
That's
You
a
pay-
vacant
Oh, yeah.
That's what we're paying now versus in the 25 to 30,000 range.
Right now, we're paying about 30,000 a year in taxes on the site.
On the
out back.
residential piece in the back, yeah.
Even still, that doesn't begin to offset a couple of students. Again, I think that, you know, and as I say, well, on the one hand, I would like to see something done with the property. On the other hand, I think, you know, regardless of whether it's 48 units or 33 units, we've got to give some serious consideration to the school department's comments on that, because this is a problem that Goffstown has dealt with in the past, and not well, unfortunately.
I think you have to recognize the fact that the school department's letter referenced another different project, not this one. I find that to be
I
a
would maybe
disservice to this
perhaps-
community from the school department, to even have sent it at this date, using the wrong information.
It could be that they were unaware of the new
Wouldn't they
application.
also benefit other schools? This is one school. The high school now has Dunbarton, now gone to Bow. So isn't other schools, while this would hurt one, this may benefit others as well?
It's all a matter of opinion, okay?
Okay, let's get back on track here. Do you have other variances you need to address?
I can address the frontage if necessary. Per the 5 questions, I could handle that, or
Yeah, Madam Chair, so as Jason presented, the criteria for the use variance as well as the density, they were wrapped together. The same
Right.
presentation was submitted, the criteria was addressed in the same manner, using the same arguments for both the use and the density, and I think it's fair to say that the same criteria could probably be applied to the frontage requirement, since we're, you know, kind of, and I know the board won't be making any final determination this evening anyways, so if the board would like the applicant to iron out a couple of questions in response to the variance request for the frontage, then he'll have the opportunity to do that. But maybe the board could consider the same criteria that were presented for the the other two variance requests and apply it
As one's-
to the frontage, since
Frontage.
he was using the same arguments for the other two. So suffice to say, I mean, Jason is here, so he would be able to say yes or no as to how you would make that presentation, but
Okay.
Are you saying that if we need to have a variance for, because there's no frontage, that they wouldn't be able to develop anything on that piece of property
Yeah, it's,
so
without a variance?
well, no, not necessarily. So that's where I'm waiting for
Okay, because that
a
seems like-
formal opinion from the town's legal counsel. And that's I sent them information, background information on the subdivision that was approved for the condominium back in 2018. And, the fact of the matter is, we have a condominium subdivision plan that was approved by the board, and it's recorded at the registry of deeds. So those are, we could parse out the language, but just for argument's sake, two lots of record. We have one condominium land unit in the front, and then we have one condominium land unit in the back. And the front condominium land unit has direct frontage on Mast Road. The one in the back, which is the one in question, that has frontage along a private street, Abington Way, which was approved as part of this condominium subdivision by the planning board. But the complication involved is that doesn't have a direct connection to a Class 5 road. It has connection by way of a private access easement over Rite Aid's parcel. So that's
So either way, no matter what they decide to put on this property, they're gonna need
I
some
think-
type
yeah,
of-
I think
if
we-
they do, which
yeah,
is, we all wanna see this property developed,
I think it's
one way
safe,
or another.
safe
Okay.
to say that to err on the side of conservative, I think it's safe to say that, yes, a variance would be necessary as it relates to frontage, based on the current configuration of
Okay.
the parcel.
Alan?
This is an approved mixed-use development, period. And that road has been there from day one. So the access road has always been known, and it was approved as such. Now, the use was, the proposed use was commercial back then. Now the proposed use is residential. So what is the difference in the two proposals? Only in the use of the land, not in the access, not in the relationship of the units or the various parcels or owners. It's just in the use of this particular piece of property. So I just think we're getting carried far away with this frontage business.
So we can wait and hear back from what Bill Drescher, from what the town attorney has to say.
Although just in reading, what is it, 674.41, the plain language of the statute seems to be pretty precise on it, that it cannot be a private road accessed only by a private easement. That, just on a plain reading of the language, that's what struck me, and I think that's, again, what we'd like to get clarified by the town council.
Yeah, and I think my understanding is that from what I have read, there are some, I won't call them footnotes, whether it derived from case law, but the legislature has expressed that the term street does not necessarily mean street in the traditional sense of the word. Well, it could mean a driveway, maybe it could mean a private access easement, so.
The bank must have one.
Well,
They
they
built
have
it.
direct frontage on
Yeah,
Mass
frontage.
Road.
That's correct,
But they,
but they don't have access. from Mass Road.
That's not the requirement, though.
Anyway, that's why we
Okay.
pay Mr.
That's
Costello.
right. So we'll get legal
Right.
counsel, and if he says they need a variance, then
It was always the intention of when the
Right.
land condo was created, that the condo would act as a single
I
parcel
think
for
that's
frontage
understood.
on Mast Road, and then would both be accessed by Abingdon
Share
Way.
the access.
So,
The condominium law in New Hampshire is very convoluted.
So we'll make sure we're
Yes.
protected and you're protected, and we'll find that out by next meeting.
Okay.
I have a question. Does anyone know when the school board next meets? Because in response to something Alan said, I think it would probably be good if we conveyed the correct information to them for their evaluation. And since we're not making a decision tonight, see if we can get their comments back before the next meeting and see if their feeling is the same on the project as now proposed.
Let's see.
Gail is consulting her.
Yeah.
So we have 6 kids at Bartlett.
First and third Monday of the month is when they meet.
So we would still then have an opportunity to get it
Before,
to them before the third Monday meeting.
First and third.
I don't know if we can share information about our current student enrollment from the initial phase of development, but we currently have 6 children living in Phase 1 that are attending Bartlett Elementary School, and we have 6 attending Mountain View Middle School, and we have 5 at Goffstown High. That's
It's kind of a uniform distribution, 1 per grade,
kind of,
7,
In how many units?
25.
25 units,
half the
you would
units.
assume you'd have the same amount.
give or take.
Some-
Yeah. And we have nearly 500 units in our portfolio, so we're pretty good at predicting family size, composition.
So that'd be the 20th of January, I believe, would be the school board meeting.
And even though our units are 2 and 3 bedroom unit, family style housing,
first and third.
6 of the 25 units are headed by a senior, 65 and
Oh,
older.
the 20th of January is Martin Luther King Day. I don't know if they would have one on the holiday.
Probably not.
Um,
That's the third Monday.
Right. And then the first one of February would be the 3rd. That would be before our next meeting.
I just raised that point because I know when you mention workforce housing, the assumption is that 33 units is going to create 66 kids, and it's really a myth. It doesn't work that way. So.
Can we make sure the school board gets this information, Nancy, or should the applicant do that?
I think it would be best if,
Comes
to
from-
make sure that
They're there.
they, come from Jason, if you could forward them the materials.
Are you familiar with that process, Jason? How does that work? Do we?
I'll just coordinate that offline probably
Yeah,
with the SAU and the gentleman who wrote the letter or his
yeah.
staff.
yeah, I'm sure I'm not sure if they will accept anything electronically, or if you have to hand carry
No
it over.
problem. Give it over.
Okay.
Best if hand delivered
Exactly.
in person.
You've been served.
We could do that.
Yep.
Right, do we need to address anything else tonight? Or do we wait for the rest of the information?
Happy to take homework with us.
Does anybody have questions, comments, or something, homework for them?
I think it's all coming down.
I don't.
Getting,
Nope.
getting information.
Okay, we'll wait for the information and
Appreciate your time tonight.
come back February 11th, 7 o'clock. I'm going to presume you'll be first on the agenda as a returning application, and as far as I know, there's no others before you right now anyway.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
I thought thought these were mine. I'm like, boy, I'm really spreading out now.
Oh, no, that's mine, yeah.
They're mine.
Actually, I think I started out in that chair.
Yeah, give me a call tomorrow.
Oh, somebody took this chair.
Okay, so we have no correspondence to go over. We have rescheduled our next meeting, so instead of the 4th, it's gonna be on the 11th.
11.
Just make sure you go vote. Hopefully you'll see most of you at the deliberations on the 4th.
That's on the fourth, where's that?
That's at the high school,
What time?
7 o'clock. That's where they go through all the warrant articles and things that are gonna be on the ballot.
7 o'clock on Wednesday again?
The 4th.
Oh, yeah,
You'll
thank
be one
you.
of 50
Definitely need
residents
those.
in attendance, along with all the town employees,
Yeah, it's not
well attended.
well attended, no.
Well, that's like
It's
the other
usually-
thing we went to.
Thank you, SB2.
So February 4th.
So, do we have any other discussion, Nancy, that you know of?
No.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
For this?
So moved.
Second?
Yeah.
I will.
You know where my 7 o'clock was.
Okay, we are adjourned.